G'day guys, my name's The Reaper, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a butcher's at Ghost of a Tale. So just for those of you who aren't aware, taking a butcher's, it's an English phrase that basically means to have a quick look at something or quickly assess something for its value. So the idea of these videos is, if say a friend recommends you a game and says, oh, I think you'll like this game, I think it's your type of thing, maybe if it's a multiplayer game we could play together, stuff like that, or maybe if you're browsing through the Steam store, something's on sale so it's a lot cheaper than it normally is, you're interested but you don't want to trawl through 10 or 12 episodes of Let's Play footage that someone's put up just to get an idea of what the game's about. The idea is, you start watching the video, I explain what the game's about, what sort of genre it is, I can get you some gameplay footage so you can see roughly what it's about, I explain the mechanics so you understand how those work, and I basically hopefully cover anything else you might need to know about the game that's going to affect your decision about whether or not you're going to purchase it. So for example, the price point, bugs or performance issues, if there's a free-to-play model that isn't in this case, is that going to affect things? Is it a good free-to-play model? Is it not consumer friendly? Is it going to run okay on your system? Hopefully I can give you an accurate idea of that. And basically just anything I think you might need to know to make an informed decision about whether or not you're going to buy the game. So by the end of the video, you've got all the details you need, hopefully at least, so you can make a decision, am I going to buy this game, yes or no? If you have any other questions about the game that I haven't covered in this video, please let me know in the comments, and I should be able to answer those best I can. So Ghost of a Tale, it's a really interesting, just cropped up on the Steam Early Access. We'll say that right from the off, it is an Early Access game, so that's, you've got to weigh that into your decision about whether or not you're going to buy it. So I'd say Ghost of a Tale is best described as a game as a third-person stealth fantasy RPG. I think that best describes what the game is. Essentially, the game is set in a pseudo-medieval but fantasy world, and it's not inhabited by humans, but you've got anthropomorphized, it's quite a difficult word to say, kind of animal creatures. So you're playing as a minstrel mouse named Tylo, who is very cute, and most of the enemies you're going to be sneaking around are people of the rat kingdom. So you've got the rats, there's also a few other creatures, there's frogs, I think there's crabs at one point as well. That's going to be quite interesting to see. But essentially it's a kind of fantasy world. There's bits of kind of fantasy lore here and there, and a bit of, it takes inspiration from a few different sources. But it's a really interesting characterful world, and the characters are really well written, which is really nice. So I'm going to show that off in a second. One thing I do need to preface this video with, I would recommend, if you're interested in the game at all, even if maybe you're not going to buy the early access, I'd recommend sticking around for the end of the video, because it's kind of quite a big caveat, or maybe not necessarily a caveat, but quite a big point of interest I need to kind of clarify. So I need to give an honest opinion about the game, but there's kind of a big caveat and a big kind of point of interest I need to kind of discuss and make clear to everyone, which I think is going to affect people's decisions about buying the game, and I think it's going to change things up a bit. So it's quite a weird kind of video this, it's a bit different to my normal first impressions, but I'd recommend, I'll show the game off as normal, I'll show you the gameplay, the mechanics, pros and cons, etc., the performance, whatever it may be. I'll stick around for the end. I've got a bit of a point I need to explain. It will become clear what I mean if you're confused at the moment, but I'll make that clear. So thank you very much. I'm going to have a brief cut and we'll get on with the gameplay. Okay guys, so this is the main game. So here is our protagonist. He is called Tylo. He is a mouse and a minstrel, so you can see the loot slung across his back. He always has that to hand, and he is a rather adorable little character. And kind of the overarching story push of the game is, you have been locked up here. This is Dwindling Heights Keep, which is one of the keeps of the kind of rat kingdom, who's kind of the biggest kind of kingdom in the game after the big war that happened. Basically, you've been put here. A baron has separated you from your wife Mera. He's slung you in jail here at Dwindling Heights Keep, so you break out the jail at the start of the game. Someone helps you break out. You have to sneak out, and the overarching kind of main quest is your desire to reunite with your wife Mera. One of the songs that you learn as a minstrel, you get a few sort of songs as standard, which are kind of quite nicely tied into the gameplay. Eventually, at some different points, you'll have to play songs for different people, and it kind of plays a little cutscene where the song gets played. And it's a nice little musical number. One of the songs you get is actually is about you being separated forcibly from your wife. You get chucked into Dwindling Heights Keep, you get thrown in the jail, you break out, and you meet a bunch of quite interesting characters. You do favours for them, they help you out, and the idea is you're trying to reunite with your wife. So it's quite a cool little plot. So basically, if you look in the top right hand corner, you can see that number there. That is the Fraps FPS counter. I wasn't recording with Fraps. If you're not sure what Fraps is, it's a piece of recording software. Unfortunately, trying to record with it does completely tank the frame rate of whatever game you're playing. So it doesn't really it can't really give an accurate indicator whilst recording with Fraps, but it does have a useful FPS counter. So I've just had that there, and I recorded using NVidia Shadowplay, which has almost no effect on the FPS whatsoever. So basically that counter is a very accurate counter of the sort of frame rate I was getting when I was playing the game, even when I wasn't recording, because that obviously does marginally affect the frame rate as well. So that's quite a good indicator of the performance I was getting. I'll post my PC specs in the description, so you can see that's the sort of FPS I was getting. There are no graphics options, so it's all the standard settings. So that's the sort of FPS I was getting when I was playing the game with my system. If you can compare your system to mine, that might give you hopefully a rough idea of the sort of FPS you'll be getting on your system. Obviously I can't guarantee what it will be like, but hopefully that should give you a rough indicator of the sort of specs you need to play the game at this moment in time. Remember, it's an early access game, so that is going to hopefully improve over time. I will say at the point of getting this information is accurate of the 31st of July, which is when I recorded this information. The game is fully updated, so this is kind of the version of the game I've got at the moment. It doesn't run particularly well. It needs a bit of smoothing. It's not awful. It hasn't dipped below 30. It's okay for an early access, but it is something they're going to have to work on. I think it's not really acceptable for a full release. So it is a little bit sort of jerky time to time. It normally hovers between 30 and 40, so it's not awful. It is playable, but bear in mind I've got a fairly solid spec PC, so maybe you might have trouble if you've got a bit of a lower spec than mine, but just have a look into that. It does need improving, but it is playable if you've got a good enough PC. Other thing I'd weigh into that, it's a very nice looking game. I will say that. I love the lighting effects, I love the textures, they look great. One thing they do need to add to the game is an FOV slider. Basically what I mean by FOV is called field of view. If you're not aware what that means, it's basically your periphery, so basically how wide an angle you can see. That's not just a gameplay affecting thing. Basically a lot of people, including myself, I do get headaches playing this game because if the FOV is set too low, if you're quite close to a screen and the FOV is low, so you've got quite a narrow field of vision. I think it's also known as depth of field. You may have heard it as that. Basically it means you've got quite a tunnel vision approach, which gives a lot of people headaches, including myself. So they do need to add a depth of field slider just to increase that, because I do get headaches playing the game, which is a shame, but that's something they can work on as the early access progresses. It's not a top priority, but it does need to be sorted, I think, when the game gets a full release. So as I'm going through the gameplay footage, I am obviously going to try and avoid any major plot spoilers, so there will be cuts here and there just to kind of give footage of what I'm talking about, just to give examples. So I'm going to try and avoid any major plot spoilers. So the game is pushed forward by a quest system. Now this is nothing new. You've got a main quest, which is kind of your main story thing, which is going to push that a bit forward. And you've got a bunch of side quests, which you can do whenever you like. That's going to help you out in certain ways. You might get a bit of extra gear, money, etc. You're not obliged by any sort of method, or you're not pushed by a certain time limit to do the main objective in a certain time limit, which is nice. And indeed, the kind of game sets itself around you actually exploring and doing those secondary objectives. There are no objective markers, so to speak of. There's also not just a big overall map you can bring up, and which will show you details of the entire area. There are little maps in the game. If you go to certain areas, if you're able to break into certain areas, you can find physical maps which you can bring up, which will give you details of certain areas. But there's not just some big open map you can pop up, and there's not going to be an objective marker which points you exactly what you need to find, which is quite an interesting take. It's not something you see a lot of these days. The game actually encourages you subtly and quite cleverly to explore different areas. So the game might tell you you need to find this certain item. If it's part of a quest, a character might give you a certain hint as to where that might be. He'll say you need to sort of do this. This will be the area. This is the sort of thing you'll need to do to try and get this. Characters might give you hints. But basically the game encourages you to kind of explore around. That's where you're going to find a lot of items. So for example, one of the quests I got here, I was told in this quest specifically I need to find the disguise parts for the guard armor. So if I get that full set of armor, I can disguise myself as one of the rat guards. And if I've got a full face helmet and the rest of the armor, they're not going to attack me because they think I'm one of them, because they're quite stupid. So that's one way of doing that. I can search around and try and find all the pieces individually. And sometimes there can be other methods as well. I talked to Rollo, who's the blacksmith, who can give you kind of hints. Again, I don't think that's too big a spoilery detail. He said if I give him 8 florins, which is the currency, he can maybe make me a set of armor as well. So there's kind of various ways of doing things, but the game isn't just going to go here, do this most of the time, and there's never going to be an objective marker saying go this to complete this objective. You're going to have to explore around. You're going to have to think a bit more than you normally would in a lot of RPGs. You're going to have to think, what's the best way of doing this? Maybe you'll have to explore around the level and sort of try and think where certain items might be. And so for example, if I want to be a certain character, if I need that guard armor, I'm going to have to maybe search around to find that armor. If I want another item, I'm going to have to look around as well. It's not just going to be, the game is going to say, a character might say, you're going to need this certain thing to help us out, you need to find this for us. You're going to have to use your brain a bit, search around, talk to people, get some hints, and actually try and get clues as to what you're going to do. This also brings me nicely onto the item system. So your clothing, As many RPGs, you bring up your inventory, you put on certain clothes, that's going to affect certain stats and resistances. So you can kind of change your clothes around like that. But pretty much all the clothing items are going to be part of a kind of disguise set. So as I was talking about, if I get all parts of the guard armor, I can disguise myself as a guard. If I'm wearing all parts of that set, as well as affecting my different stats, if I have the whole set, I'm going to be disguised as a guard. Now as you go around the level and you explore different parts, again the game subtly encourages you to move around. You can find loads of little items which are going to affect your stats individually, but again if you get a set, you can get maybe the full ranger set or the full ninja set or the full thief set, etc, etc. And you might be able to use those, I've never actually come across it, but you might be able to use those in a certain situation. So for example, there was one quest, I'll try to spoil something, where a character said he would only help me if I was a certain person. However, this character wasn't very intelligent, and I noticed that one of the item sets seemed to mimic exactly the character he was describing, who he said, this is the only person I'm going to help is this guy, I'm not going to help you because I don't trust you. And kind of the game might be subtly hinting that if I get all the pieces to that, I might be able to trick him without the game telling me directly that I can disguise myself as this guy to help me out, which is really neat actually. There's very few games that seem to do that, so that's kind of the game subtly kind of getting you to explore and to try different things. Suits itself in the game, it kind of adapts itself to the item system, gets you to explore, gets you to try different things, think on your feet. The game doesn't just point you in a direction, which is really nice to see. So that's one big plus point of the game. Hopefully I've made that clear. So the stealth system is pretty basic stuff, nothing too complicated here. So basically there's two ways the guards can see you, so they can get direct line of sight. If they have that for you for too long, you're going to get spotted, you're going to have to hide. Second note, way they can hear you is through sound. So basically, sight, if they get direct line of sight for you for too long, that black box is going to fill up and it's going to go redder and redder. If it reaches full redness, they're going to spot you, you're going to have to hide. And basically you just have to break, either get out of range before the box reaches full, or break direct line of sight by getting behind cover. Pretty simple there. With sound, it works a little bit differently. As you walk around, you're going to be generating noise. If you sprint, you're going to be making more noise. Or if you hold right click as standard, you're going to go into sneak mode, so that kind of zooms in slightly and the screen goes grey just to sort of denote that you're in sneak mode. If you're in sneak mode, you're going to make less noise. You will still make a bit of noise when you get really close to them. That box will fill up, even if you are in sneaky mode, if you're very close to a guard. So basically, to stop that going up anymore, you have to stop, stay there, that box will then go down. You can sneak a bit further forward. If you're still too close, you're going to have to stop intermittently if you're very close to a guard, otherwise that box is going to keep going up and that's going to get red. That's going to mean you're spotted. If you're spotted by a guard, it doesn't mean you get spotted by all of them, it's just by the guards that actually see you. You're going to have to run away, the guards are going to try to attack you, and you have to try and get either into one of the hiding spots ideally, or you can just break line of sight by hiding around a corner or something. The guard might eventually just search around for a bit, the box will go blue and there'll be a question mark, and then eventually they'll give up. Nice little touch, kind of makes it a bit more obvious if you're going to be hidden or not. If you go to a certain hiding spot, you need to get into the hiding spot while the guard can't see you. Otherwise they can obviously see you get into that hiding spot, which makes it a waste. However, the game kind of does help you out here a little bit in the sense that if you go up to a hiding spot, if you hold the sneak mode to try and get into the hiding spot while a guard is after you, it will be in yellow text to denote that you will be safe if you go to the hiding spot. If it's red, it means you can't go in it and the guard is going to spot you going in there. So it does make it clear if you can get to a hiding spot in time, or if you get into the hiding spot, is the guard going to see you or not. So that's a nice little touch. Other than that, pretty basic, pretty effective stealth system. On top of being able to sneak around, you can also use tools, which they're called in this game, are basically objects that you can use to distract guards in certain ways. So as in many stealth games, you pick up a tool, you throw it in a certain direction, that's going to create a sound, so you can throw it away from where a guard's standing. So if there's a guard in a permanent position who's kind of stationary and is blocking a corridor that you're trying to get around and you can't get past him, you can throw a tool, that's going to create a noise, they're going to walk towards it, search around for a second and then return to either that spot or to their regular patrol route. Just makes it a bit easier getting around guards. There is a nice little bit of variety in these tools as well. So the most basic ones, for example, are sticks, which you can find pretty much anywhere. You throw that at any point, it's going to make a noise wherever it lands and distract any guards in earshot of that. But there are slight variations on the tools as well. So for example, you've got grease pots. If you throw one of those away and a guard is going to walk towards it, it's going to slip on the grease pot and it's going to knock itself out for an amount of time. Quite a long amount of time as well, so they are a bit more limited, but if you're in a more difficult situation, you can throw a grease pot maybe. They're going to slip on that if they walk towards it, and that's going to knock them out, so you can take out guards. Temporarily, they are going to come back. There is no sort of combat system of any way. Once you've been spotted, you have to hide, and you can temporarily stun guards in order to kind of sneak around them, but it's not a form of combat. You can't take out guards permanently, you can't hide the body. It's not like, say, a Hitman game. It's only a temporary solution by knocking them out. You can't take them out sort of permanently. So it's just a extra way of making the stealth a bit easier in certain situations. One thing I would say about throwing the tools is it would be nice. The crosshair isn't particularly accurate. So for example here, I'm trying to throw a glass bottle at the back of this guard's head, because if they don't have a helmet, I found out if you throw a glass bottle, which is another type of tool, if it hits them, it's actually going to knock them out as well. So that's kind of unique to the glass bottle and maybe a few other tools that I haven't found yet. But you can't do that with a stick. You can do that with the glass bottle, but I would have thought that crosshair seemed at kind of the back of his, sort of between his shoulder blades, that crosshair was pointing and it just missed completely. I've also found if you try and throw, say, through an archway, it looks like where the crosshair's pointing, you're going to throw an object and it's going to go sort of clear through where you're sort of aiming towards, but I tend to find sometimes it clips on the side of walls and objects that you think it wouldn't, just due to the way it throws. So it would be nice if they can implement, say, a system. I think the Hitman games had them where it actually draws a line where you're going to throw the object. So it's going to tell you if you're going to hit any interposing terrain, because sometimes you do throw an object, it is going to look like you've got a clear enough path, but it will end up clipping terrain. The guy's going to get alerted to that. You're going to have to hide quickly. It does throw things off a bit as well, considering as well the inventory system, there's no hotkeys for the tools as well, and when you bring up the inventory, it doesn't actually pause the game. So it would be nice if they could implement, I think it would be a nice little touch, just a way of pinpointing exactly where your object is going to land. It would be nice if they could put that in. Slight annoyance there. Otherwise, considering guards patrol as well, if you're quickly trying to select a certain tool, so if I need to get a glass bottle out, if I don't think I can sneak around a guard, if that guard's patrolling up and down, I don't want him seeing me. If I bring the inventory out, the game is not actually going to pause, which is another little bugbear I'd have, considering you have to be quite well timing with kind of your stealth runs. There's no hotkey system. I think they're planning on implementing it, but as of the 31st of June, there isn't one in the version of the game that I've got. As I say, with the early access, you have to sort of keep an eye on when these updates come in. This information, as far as I'm aware, is accurate up until now. Would be nice, need a hotkey system, because the game won't pause when you build up the inventory. You have to select manually the right tool that you want, and then put it away again once you're done. Also, when you pick up a tool from the ground, it automatically equips that one. So it's just a little bit kind of hard to quickly get things. You just want a quick hotkey system. I can select which tool I need quickly without going into the inventory, trying to find the right one while the guards are still moving around. So that's another little bugbear. So I want more accurate throwing. Would be nice, just a clear indication of where your objects are going to land. And also, due to the lack of the game not pausing when you open the inventory and there's no hotkey system, it can be a bit of a pain selecting the right tool at the right time. Other than that, it's a fairly basic but functional system. Just a couple of bugbears there I think they could work on. And now I'm going to come on to the point I was talking about earlier on at the start of the video, where I mentioned there was kind of a game-changing or generally just important point I had to mention at one point, which I asked everyone to stick around for. And essentially, normally when I would do a Taking a Butcher's video, I would run through the game as I've done, showing gameplay, normally kind of more longer solid chunks of gameplay in which I do different things just to show it off a bit more freely to avoid giving out any spoilers. In this case, that's why I've done that. I'm trying to avoid any spoilers, so I'll split it up a bit. But generally, I'll come on to the verdict and I'll give my opinion on whether I think you should buy the game, and you'd have all the information you need if you wanted to make your own decision. This time is a little bit different. I've done games in the past that have been indie games. A lot of them have had very small developers. After I bought the game, I had another look at the sort of Steam store page, the early access page. Remember, it's an early access game, obviously a very important point. And I kind of looked a bit more into the detailed description. He has made it clear. Essentially, this game, I've done indie games in the past. I've done quite a few actually now, a lot of the more recent videos. However, this one is essentially made by one bloke, and occasionally a couple of his mates help out with some artwork and some coding. It says, according to the Steam page, about 90% of the coding and artwork is done by one man. And he's been doing this for several years now. I think there are screenshot comparisons between the game as it sits now in the early access and from 2014, and he's mentioned work he's done back in 2013. So it's been going at least 3 years. And then it comes to the old point of, does price point and does the fact that it's an indie game give it certain buy-offs and certain things you'd let slide due to the fact it's an indie game and not made by a big publisher? I think, to be fair, it does. Put it this way, the early access release, it says on the Steam page, Dwindling Heights Keep as a content measure. The guy selling it is suggesting the current content in the early access release represents about 25 to 30% of the final game's content in terms of actual sort of explorable locations and quests. So about a quarter to just over a quarter of the final content is what is in the current early access release. So you don't have access to the full game. It's not fully completable. It's just kind of a taster of what's going on. Obviously, I need to mention that anyway, because that's a very important point based on whether or not you're going to buy the game. However, obviously, I do feel, in fairness, I have to factor in the fact that it's such a small team. Partly, it's an early access release. There's never been any doubt of that. It's not going to be a complete game anyway. But partly, I feel it's not fair on a hard-working indie developer to rip his work apart in a half-an-hour video when he's been working on something for several years. I am going to try and be honest, and hopefully I've tried to be as honest as I can about the game. I've pointed out its flaws. I think the FPS, as it currently sits, obviously early access, it needs polishing. There is work that needs to be done. Obviously, he's admitted it's only about a quarter to just over a quarter of what he considers the final game to be. There's some rough edges. It would be nice if there was better targeting on the thrown objects. Sometimes the guards are a bit glitchy. It needs an FOV slider, the field of view I was talking about, to expand your periphery, because some people get headaches doing that. Is a bit annoying. And occasionally you may have seen a couple of the clips when you try and walk over or sneak over a little sort of mound in the ground or a little stairway, just a little step. Sometimes you get caught on it. I got that a couple of times. That is quite annoying. There are some rough edges. It does need some work, and there's only a portion of the game is currently available on the early access. However, the core mechanic to the game work really nicely. Some of them work very well in the sense of stuff you get less often in game these days. There are no objective markers. You have to do a bit more exploring. The game subtly suggests certain ways. The world is absolutely really endearing. I love the characters. The dialogue, I've shown very little or none of that in the video, obviously to avoid spoilers because there's not very much content at the moment. But the writing is really nice. The characters are compelling. The game looks beautiful. The characters look really cool. I love the anthropomorphized animals. Tylo looks really cute as a mouse. I have not seen a game with this much character in ages. It's such a fun concept. There are rough edges. It's not complete. However, I would say if that's enough to put you off buying it, if you are interested, the core mechanics are great. It needs a bit of polishing, but we're well away from a full release yet. If you look at the Steam store, that might give you indications of the updates as to what's going on. It's only just come on early access. I would say if it looks interesting to you, I would really keep an eye on it. If you're not going to buy the early access, it even says on the Steam page, this is only part of the content that's going to be in the final release. I understand if people don't want to buy that. They don't want to buy an incomplete game, not knowing what's going to happen down the line and what the final release is going to be like. He understands, that's perfectly understandable. He says, I can understand people not wanting to do that. However, I would say the core mechanics are great. I would love to see this get a full release. I would love to see people back up this game because it's got a really nice world. The core mechanics are basic, but they work well. They just need some polishing, and I would love to see more areas. I would love to see more exploration. I'd love to see more characters, more creature types, and just have the mechanics shored up a bit. So when it comes out for full release, I think this will be an amazing game. The feedback on the early access has been pretty positive as well. So I suggest if you're not willing to buy the early access right off the bat, I would say keep an eye on the game, maybe go on the website, maybe generate a bit of sort of media support, generate a bit of word of mouth, get a bit of support for this guy because I think he's creating something which is really nice, and maybe in six months to a year down the line, however long it takes, that's just an estimate on my part, I have no idea how long it'll take, but maybe we'll see a really interesting game down the line because the core mechanics are solid, the world's really nice. So I'd say if you're not willing to buy the early access release yet, keep an eye on it, generate a bit of support, maybe support his project, might be able to donate in some way, I'm not sure, you'll have to ask him. But I would keep an eye on this project because if it's not ready now, it should be, if everything goes to plan, a really nice game down the line. So keep it on your radar and just sort of keep spreading it around a bit because I think there's a really nice game in the works here. Needs a bit of work, but I love the concept. So I think hopefully that's an objective opinion and fair opinion as I can give about the game. If you have any more questions about the game itself, please let me know below in the comments. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Please check out some of my other Taking the Butcher's videos. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.